you guys, welcome to my little paintbrush. My name is Miss Cammie and we get to paint the desert today, but it's going to be beautiful because there's beauty in all of nature. So I'm excited about this painting. We're going to work with a lot of warm and cool tones, which contrast super cool together. So I hope you're excited and I'm glad that you're here. Before we start, just keep in mind that if I'm going too fast for you, you can pause this video, you can rewind it. You don't have to keep up with me, so don't feel rushed through this process. And remember that you can also make any adjustments to the painting that you want. If you want this pattern, you can find it in the description below. Just follow the links. If you're working with one of our paint kits, awesome. This will be traced on there for you and you'll be good to go. So let's just get started right away. I've got a 3/4 inch flat, my brush of choice. Just find whatever flat you have and that'll work just fine. I'm gonna get my brush wet. Here's our palette today. We are missing green, so I'm gonna put green on it real quick. Lots of colors happening, but we do have some green. So I'll pop that on there and now we are good to go. I'm gonna start with my lightest sky and work towards the darkest part. I just find that helps, otherwise I lose my lightest value. So we're going to start in our yellows here. So I'm going to take my brush, get some white on it, go into that nice deep yellow, and I'm going to start to brush across my canvas. Now when I get to my mountains, I can go into them and it's not going to be a big deal, but if you want to kind of just gently shape around them and then blend that so it looks like you're keeping that horizontal brush stroke, that's fine too. That way you don't lose the mountains and you don't have to worry about waiting for anything to dry while you, before you want to go into those. So just keep that brush going horizontal as much as you can. And I've just been putting chunks of white on my brush because I want to lighten this area that's closest to my mountains. So there we go, we got that in. Now we're going to work quickly into our darker values and darker tones as we come up into our sky. And the reason we want to work quickly is our blending time is super short with acrylic paints, which is a lot of fun because we can start and finish a painting all in one day, but it's tricky to get a good blend. You have to work kind of quick. So now I'm going to play into my orange, and I don't have to wash my brush for that. Yellow and orange are good friends. We're working with those warm colors, and so we don't have to be too concerned. Now I'm working on a piece of multimedia paper, and so you're going to notice that it starts to kind of wrinkle a little bit. And maybe you're working on this paper too. And if that's happening for you, just keep working with it. Keep putting in your colors and we can pull it tight in just a minute. I'm going to focus now in my oranges, but I'm going to continue to use my white for coverage. Okay, and I'm going to pull that orange down into my yellow at times so that I don't have any stripes happening on my canvas. And as I move up towards the top, I'm going to be adding less and less white. That yellow is going to start to come off of my brush and we're going to see more of those dark orange values. Now I'm going to do some orange and start to introduce that red. Now we're going to get that summer sunset or sunrise look happening pretty prominently on our surface, which I for one am a huge fan of. I just think it looks beautiful and I love that ombre into that red. So gorgeous sky, exactly the way that I want it. I'm gonna wash that brush, but I'm also going to, like I said, I'm gonna straighten my surface again, pull it really tight, tape it back down, okay? so that you can avoid those bubbles as you're trying to work. Okay. If you're working with a canvas, you don't have to do this, obviously, but if you've got multimedia paper, it tends to kind of curl up on you. Okay, I'm going to wash my brush really good because I'm going to be working in my mountains now, and those are going to be purple. So we're going to be using our warmer tones, and so I don't want that yellow and orange to get in there and muddy the mountain color. So here's our purple, but I actually want to grab a nice chunk of red and mix it into my purple, and it makes this beautiful deep purple color. I don't want to mix all of it. I'm leaving some light purple aside for my very background mountains, but I'm going to take this kind of plum looking color and I'm going to fill in my foreground mountains with it. Now this is going to take us a coat of paint or two, so don't get too concerned or discouraged as you're painting this on and thinking, wow, that's not the right color, or that's not giving me good coverage. No need to be concerned about that just yet. Just get the paint on there and let that first layer start to dry. That's why we're going to do it before we do the background mountains. Okay, so coming up here and putting those in. Maybe your mountain shape changes a little bit than what it was when you started. That's normal as we shape things in. We're going to come to the foreground. I'm not going to worry too much about staying out of my lines. This line is just to help us know where we're at when we get to our ground where all of our cactus will be. Okay, so pretty simple. You're just kind of getting that in there and not spending too much time concerned about your coverage and all that. Okay, so now we'll rinse out pretty good here, and we're going to make a lighter purple for the mountains that are in the very furthest part of our painting. And to do that, I'm going to lighten some purple. Okay, just think of, you're driving down the road and you're looking out the window and you see the mountains in the distance and they start to kind of gray, and that's because they're that far away. They start to kind of blur, and so that's why they're always sort of that grayish color. So we're playing on that idea that these are furthest away for us. Okay, now if your yellow sky is wet, you're going to want to be really super careful with this step, because yellow and purple will mud. Okay, so got that in there. That's not going to need another coat of paint, but I'm going to put some white on my brush before I move on and just kind of give some light to the tops of my mountains here. Okay, and this will just make more sense as we paint along to have that in there. We'll come back with some other fun things to add to that, but I'm going to take this mountain and kind of put it in front of the other one, just like this. Sometimes there's too much paint on our brush and we can't really see it. But I'm just pulling this mountain into the front. This one, make sure it's in the back. We can do that with those little lines. You can see how you already have sort of two mountains going on there. You have one in the foreground, one in the back. Okay, I'm gonna tighten my surface again. Anytime we do these paintings that have lots and lots of paint going on really quickly, we gotta just keep pulling it a little bit tight. So I'm gonna do that again. Okay, perfect. Now those are drying. We're gonna take just black paint, believe it or not, and we're gonna paint the base of our painting down here, okay? So we're gonna get this in with just black paint. And I'm just going right into my easel, so that might be a little confusing for you to see where my surface ends, but I'm just gonna play into that. And if you're wrapping your canvas, if you're using a stretched canvas for this piece, go ahead and wrap it as you go. That'll help you as well. Okay, it's looking beautiful already. I can see it come together. We're gonna do another layer on our foreground mountains. If yours are still damp, grab a piece of paper or a plate and fan it off. You can also use a blow dryer. Just keep the setting on cool so you don't burn your canvas or change the vibrancy of your paint color. All right, I'm gonna keep in that plum color, but I'm gonna move more purpley right now. So I'm gonna pull in more purple for this next layer. Okay. That first layer though is really gonna help us. It's gonna come through in those really good tones. But this next one, I wanna play a lot into my purple. Don't worry though, those reds, like I said, they will have their moment to shine. And these mountains, they take a minute. Purple is one of those colors that anytime I use it when teaching, I always tell people, you know, you're gonna have a bit of a struggle. It's just like one of those shy colors that doesn't really want to make an appearance, and so you have to be constantly doing these layers to help it stand out a little bit. I come down into that. Be careful if your ground is still wet, but also keep in mind that, you know, we're gonna have more layers happening. So I go across there, and again, I'm gonna let that dry, and we'll go over it one more time before getting our good, fun blends happening, okay? All right, while that's drying, let's go ahead and work on our sun that's up in the sky, shining bright. Just gonna be yellow, so I'm taking just a minute to really ensure that my brush is clean. That's really, really important. Now, if you want, you can grab a piece of chalk or lightly pencil in your sun. If you're feeling nervous about just freehanding it, you can take, you know, circles are kind of tricky in general. So if that's making you nervous, you can kind of gently chalk it in. Maybe you have a lid or a cup that's the perfect size. You can use that too to get that perfect circle. I'm going to grab some white and go over to my yellow and make a nice light yellow and just put my first layer in. Oh, and that's what happens when you get too much moisture in your brush. Oh, pull that up. It's not wanting to. I've got so much paint on my hands, I'm afraid to pass that on. This is going to need another layer or two, so we're just putting in the first one. Okay. So keep that in mind too, so that you don't spend time thinking, oh my gosh, I got to put this on really thick so that it has good coverage. No, you don't. You just need to put a layer on, let it dry, and then we can go back to it. Okay, and circles will grow because we want to have that perfect circle all the time, and it just doesn't always happen that way for us. Okay, so we've got the first layer in on that. Our nice purple mountains are almost dry, but not quite. So while we wait for that to happen, I'm going to get a filbert. I enjoy using a filbert, especially lately. It's my new favorite. It's just more rounded at the top than flat, but it's not pointy. If you don't have a filbert, just grab a smaller flat, or you can continue to use the big flat or a round. Mine is pretty dry. I'm just going to dab it in some of my light yellow, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to play off that sun in the sky, and I'm going to brush some yellow on the top of my mountains. If it's not showing up because it's competing with the purple, just use some more white and then put that yellow on top of the white, and it'll show up a little bit more. But just pull it down and along the side where that foreground mountain, the one in the front, is coming into play. And we're just dabbing it in a little bit, because of course that sun is playing a big role in casting some shadow and light onto these mountains. And I actually really enjoy, you don't often want to associate or stack your yellows and your purples together, because they do tend to have that muddy effect to it. But I really like in this painting how it just sort of, they're just kind of sun-kissed here at the top. I'm going to put a little water on my brush because I want to blend this part in a little bit more. And water will help that not be so harsh right there. Remember, you've got to have wet paint in order to get that blendy consistency happening. Okay, I'll rinse that out. Still have a little bit of wet paint on our mountains happening. So I'm going to go ahead and work on my ground here. I'm going to continue to use my filbert. I'm going to go into my brown paint. Okay, and I'm going to build a brown, put some white on there. I'm going to build just sort of this brown layer, okay? And the black background, believe it or not, is going to help. It's going to come through. We're going to leave some of it behind. We're not going to cover everything with this brown. Okay, we want some of that black to kind of act as the shadow that's happening. And once we get our fun cactus in here, it'll really start to showcase what we're trying to do here. We'll put some light and everything, and you'll be able to see, what cactus might be further in the distance versus which ones are up close and all that. But this, we'll just put this little layer of this brown in for now, and then we'll have that to kind of play with as we get our cactus in. Okay. Rinse that out. Looking good. You can hear my swish. It's really good to have a good swish happening. I'm going to grab a little bit more purple so I don't run out as I start to play into these mountains for another layer of paint. It's just necessary. Okay, again, I'm still pulling in bits of red, but I'm trying to stick more in my purples now. So now here we go. I'm going to fill this mountain in, and you're going to start to see as we work in all the fun things. You might find yourself needing less layers of paint. You might find yourself needing more layers of paint. Whatever it is that you need, whatever quality of paint you're using, Depends on how much paint you're laying down with each brush stroke, how diluted your paint is. All that stuff is going to make a difference and determine, you know, how many layers you need and all that. So, you know, if you're having a different experience at home with your paint, just try and work with it and don't worry if it's a little bit different of a result than mine. That's not the point. The point is, are you enjoying yourself and are you creating something that you're proud of? And hopefully that is happening for you. Okay, now our mountains are where they need to be. Before I let that dry, I'm going to put a nice chunk of red on one corner of my brush. Okay, and I'm actually going to take that red and I'm going to blend it along the ridge of each mountain. I'm going to take it up and sort of brush it down. Now this is, again, this is our sky playing a part in our mountains, shining a reflection, that red and orange in the sky playing its part, and you can just blend it down while that paint is still wet. Okay, and it's just going to be this beautiful. And what's amazing about this step is it's really, really going to come through when it dries. And I encourage you to take a picture of it when it dries and really see if you can find that glow that happens from this red paint playing its part in our mountain scene. I can already see it. It's beautiful. Okay, rinse that out really, really good, because I'm going to go put another layer in my sun. So I'm going to give it a nice rinse. I might even check it in my clean water, make sure I don't have any purple or red in there. And I'm going to come back to that yellow. And now I'm going to go in and finish up this sun. If you have some additional chalk residue on your canvas, which I can see some on mine, add some white in there, lighten it up. Don't worry about that right now. Don't even try and wash that off right now. Soon as your painting is completely dry, you can go back with a damp paper towel, a damp paintbrush, and you can wash it off. But don't try and do it until your painting is dry. Otherwise you might get some smeared paint. Okay, here we go. We're going to let this dry. You kind of have to, unless you're following an exact circle, you kind of have to let it go with some of these, because you know we're never going to get that perfect circle. But I want to add a little bit of orange in there, so I'm going to put orange on a corner of my brush, and I'm just going to paint like a C in my sun here. To play on that color palette that we have. And if you need to go back and kind of add a layer in there, you can. That kind of picked up some of the paint as I did that step. Okay. Got our sun happening and our mountains happening. Everything's coming together beautifully. I'm gonna rinse this out. We have a moment because of needing our mountains to dry. So I'm gonna grab a plate and I'll show you what you can do to kind of dry it off pretty quick. Just fan it like this. And again, acrylics dry really quick. If you want to use a blow dryer, you can totally do that. You can grab a blow dryer. I do often. Again, the biggest thing you want to avoid with a blow dryer is putting it on hot, because then obviously fire hazard. But believe it or not, you can also change the brightness of your the pigment in your paint. You can burn it a little bit and dull it. So if you're going to use the blow dryer, if you're going to go that route, just be careful of that. Okay, I think I can start working. Oh, not quite. Fan it a little more. These mountains just take a lot of layers, but they're totally worth it in the end when we have a nice, beautiful scene, desert scene. And you guys, if you're not from Utah, you might not be familiar with big mountains, even snow-capped mountains, and cactus all in the same shot. But that's something that happens often where I live. Of course, none of these mountains are snow-capped, but we have these big mountains. Usually people think of flat desert, but where I live, that isn't the case. Okay, so just about dry enough for me to start painting here. The thing with paint with acrylics is you enter a sort of sticky phase, okay? And when you enter that sticky phase, your paint is pretty vulnerable to start being peeled off of your surface. So if you try to paint over your sticky phase of drying, you'll start to lift the paint instead of lay it down. And that's what I'm trying to avoid, which happened a little bit in the moon or sun. You want to avoid that. If it happens, let it dry and you can touch it up, which we'll probably do up there. But for now, I'm just going to fan it off here. Okay, we'll let that continue to dry a little bit longer, and I'm going to go back to my filbert and I'm going to add some light into my foreground here. So I'm going to put this brown on, and I'm going to get a little corner of white. Okay, and I'm going to take that corner and I'm going to start to create little highlights and bits of it's very rocky ground. I told you that brown will show up now a lot more as we have that white into play. Okay, and what I want you to avoid doing is going across here and just putting triangles. Take some of them and pull them forward like that, and then go into the foreground a little bit even more and create more diversity that way. Okay, and it's okay if some of it offloads really bright versus, you know, some of it will be a little darker. That's not a problem either. And when we put our cactus in, we'll be able to kind of determine and decide which cactus are going to be all the way in the front, which ones are going to seem further away. We're going to do different sizes that will help with that too. Okay, I think our mountains are in a good place to start really pulling in the highlights and shadows that happen in the mountains. Okay, so this side of my canvas is still a little wet, so I'm going to avoid that. But I'm going to load with purple. It's got a little of the red in there, and I'm going to get some white, and I'm going to come in and play on this little ridge first. I'm going to skim the top and then pull it down and just brush it. Okay, so skim the top, pull down, and just kind of brush through like that. Okay, so pretty simple, and you start to get this effect happening. Okay, So we're gonna do just the tip of this one because it's mostly going out of our seam here, but we'll do the tip of it. We'll add bits of yellow in a minute too, but you can put as much purple as you want on that brush and just kind of blend that in. Okay, skimming and pulling down. Okay, getting all of our different values in. You can play back with your reds. You know, one thing that I find, and this rings true all the time with people, is I have to remind them, you know, things don't just happen. You have to work with it. So usually you're not going to have this one brush stroke and suddenly your painting is phenomenal. That does happen sometimes, and it's like, don't touch it, that's perfect. But most of the time you have to work back and forth in your paint. So be okay with that. Now this one I'm going to skim the rim, come down, and then I'm going to create another little boop, just like that. Okay, and again, I'm just going to brush it down like that. You don't have to brush all the way to the base of your mountain. Just kind of lightly feather it back like that. You see there's lots of purples in there. You can add some right here. You know, what do you want? Do you want more reds? Do you want more purples? What is speaking to you? And that's what you need to do. Okay. I think I want to tone down that section just a little bit. Sometimes it screams too loud and I don't want it to look like a snow-capped mountain that we just talked about. I want it to look a little bit more just like light is hitting it. Okay. Isn't it amazing how mountains form and as you're painting them? It's incredible to me. It still amazes me. Okay, now we're going to come over here and we're going to just, these are going to be two little mountain friends here that are connected, and then they're going to kind of come up a little bit like that. So we're going to have these little ripples here, and then just blending it in. If at any point you think, oh, my brush has way too much white on it, or way too much red, or way too much purple, you know, you can wash it off and start over, go over those areas again if it's too much. But this really starts to define who's in front, who's in back, what's going on. These lines will start to define them. Looking fabulous. I'm going to do one more little just indication right here that there's something else happening where this big mountain is. Keep in mind we haven't done our cactus yet, so if there's areas of the canvas that you're really not loving, we still have to put our cactus in so you can hide those with those cactus. Okay, this is looking beautiful. We'll add little touches of yellow to kind of go with the glow. As soon as that dries, I'm going to rinse out. Rinse out here, and I'm actually, my moon is, or my sun, I keep calling it my sun, but my moon. My sun is bugging me. I gotta touch it up a little bit. There we go. We were pulling paint off of it because we went in a little too soon. So we were pulling paint up. So I just wanted to touch that up, and I'm happier with that. Okay, beautiful. Now I'm going to go back to my filbert and I'm going to put in my cactus. Now if you're nervous about freehanding this, grab a piece of chalk and chalk them in. Just make sure your mountains are dry before you play with your chalk, okay? We're going to do 5 because that's a nice uneven number. And if you've painted with me a long time, or if you know the art world's very much go with the odd. It's more attractive to the eye. It makes more sense. I've seen it a million times. I'm going to use my filbert, loosen up my black paint, and I'm going to put my cactus in with black first. Okay, and I'm going to start with my tallest one, and it's going to be slightly shorter than my sun. And I'm going to start and just do a straight line down. Okay, now if my mountains are a little bit wet still, it's going to be okay because I'm using this black paint and it's just going to cover it right up, okay? Okay, now this is where you can decide, okay, is this cactus in the foreground? Yes, it's one of my big ones, so I'm going to pull it right on through that brown desert floor, okay? Now I'm going to do a little, got a hair on my brush here, a little attachment that's going to kind of be peeking around the back. I'm going to pull that in right there. Okay, this little guy is just right in the back. Then I'm going to do an arm right here that comes around and attaches itself. Cactus are so fun to paint. And I tell people all the time when you're painting anything in nature, really, if you get something a little bit wonky looking, it's okay, because if you've ever gone on a nature walk, there's all kinds of things that seem a little bit crazy. Okay, I'm going to do one right here, spin it. They've got those curved edges there. As you build your cactus, if you need to thicken the trunk, do it as you go. Okay, so there's one. And then we have a nice little one that's going to be in the background. So what I want to do is make sure that I stop right on top of that desert floor, because this one's in the back. And so it would be behind all of that fun stuff. You can use sort of the toe of your brush to get a smaller stroke. So that's a cute little one right there. And then we have one that's sort of medium size and it's hanging out right here. And this one's also in the background, so I'm going to stop right at my desert floor. And if you go into it too much, you can fix it with some brown and some white here in a minute. Not a huge deal, you just want to try and not go straight through it. Then we've got a little hand right here around the top. This is why I like to use this filbert, because it's already got that round top, and I can shape these in pretty easy with it. But I've noticed and learned over the years that every artist has that brush that speaks to them, so it might be a completely different one to you. You might love using a round for this or something like that. Okay, so I also have another tall one that's going to go in right here. Okay, so I'm going to go as straight down as I can. I'm curving a little bit here, but that's okay. It's also going to be in front, so I can go straight through my desert floor. Now I don't want it as tall as this one. This one's going to be my tallest, so I'm keeping that in mind. And I'm going to put an arm up here towards the top, curve it in. Okay, then I have a nice long one that's right here. have another short one right here. Sort of comes up next to that one but doesn't touch it. Now look up pictures of cactus and the sky's the limit, right? So many options. Okay, we're gonna do one more and it's just gonna be right here. It's gonna be another one that's in the background. It's a little smaller than that one. We're gonna put in some of these arms. Try and spice it up so they don't all look exactly the same, which can be kind of tricky. And there we go, those are in, just like that, okay? Beautiful. And we're gonna work on that dark value cactus. Now, if you're looking at this and thinking you like it just the way that it is, you're not alone. It's really hard to push through when we get to certain steps. We just wanna call it good, but we're gonna push through and we're gonna add some layers to this. I'm gonna add some yellow to my green and brighten it up a little bit. Make some nice limey green. I don't need my yellow, well I do need a little bit for my mountain still, so I'm gonna keep a little bit of it, but I'm going to make a nice limey green. I'm gonna get some water, thin it out. Okay, I want it to show up. What we're going to do is we're going to create those lines in our cactus. Okay, with this green, we're not going to worry too much about perfect lines because honestly, as this green dries, you're going to barely be able to see it. It's just going to have a hint of green throughout. We're going to make these lines. Make sure your cactus are pretty much dry. We're going to create these lines all the way down. Okay, you might just get 2 or 3 brush strokes in there. You can break up those strokes as well. You don't have to have all of them from top to bottom. Okay, put these in. Like I said, as it starts to dry, you're not going to see it very well, but then we're going to add another value and it's going to start to pop and just be super, super cool. So for now, just put in, sometimes it might just be 3 lines for one cactus, but you want the black to come through as the shadow, okay? So play on that a little bit. And you want to play on that idea of those cactus having those lines, right? Those grooves through them. You could even go as far as to add your little spikes in these. If you're feeling it, go for it. Because I'm working on this multimedia paper, my paint is going to dry even faster than yours. And that's why I'm able to do this without stopping and having to dry my canvas. But that might be different for you. So if you're thinking, man, how is hers already dry? You're not doing anything wrong. If you're painting on a canvas, it's just going to take you a little bit longer to have a dry surface. Okay. You can see there's chunks that will come through a lot brighter. Some will be a little bit more muted. But they'll definitely make more sense as we get our next layer in. So I'm just trying to say, hey, this is This is a cactus, and these are the little shadows and bends that are throughout them. Okay, so you've got that layer on and you're starting to build those values. So now we're going to go into some white and we're going to lighten that green up. Okay, and now with this lighter green, now we are going to stay towards the top of our cactus. We can pull it down a little bit, but we don't want to pull it down too far, okay, because we want to indicate that the light is happening towards the top, okay? And this is when these layers start to make sense. And they're not just random lines anymore. We can really start to indicate what is happening. But notice I'm not going as far down with this step as I did the others, that first step of green. This one is staying pretty much towards the top, and then you can make indications that these lines continue down like that, but you don't have to finish it off. Okay, so now you're getting that cactus look by building on these values, which I love it. I just think it's so unique. You have, because these cactus against all these bright colors, they would become shadows, right? But because we're putting these bits of light in there, we can still play on the design that a cactus has. Flip your canvas if you need it. No need to stay upright the whole time. If you're having a hard time with that, you can flip it around. I enjoy painting on my lap sometimes, even though it's terrible for my back. I do that sometimes as well. So you can see these cactus come to life, like I said. Keeping our light at the top here of each of these fun cacti. Can be tricky to paint these lines, so break them up a bit if you need to. And take off the pressure to have one solid line happening, one stroke. And you can come down into it a little more to just, like I said, really drive home this idea of the design of a cactus, but for the most part, just focus on your light up at the top. Now, if you want to go even lighter than that, you can add some more white, and you can just do little bits of white, sort of really at the tippity top of the cactus like that. This is very much a value build. I will say just be careful when you're using a lot of white, not to get too excited, because you can have a whiteout situation fairly easy, and we don't want that. So I'm just going to do a few strokes towards the top and let that be my brightest point, and then my viewer can see that my shadow falls down towards the base of my cactus, as it should, as the mountains are shadowing it, and it's getting less and less detailed. Okay, beautiful. These look fantastic. Can make some separations there where the arms are kind of in the back. This is looking pretty darn good though. I am loving it. If you need to do any fixes to the ground, if you need to make any adjustments to tuck those other smaller cactus in the back, you can. If not, I'm going to grab my filbert again, put just a little bit of that yellow on it, and I'm just going to kiss some of these mountain ridges with a little bit of yellow. Just the tiniest bit, you guys, just to kind of indicate. You can do this before you do the cactus, but we were waiting for letting our mountains dry, so I'm gonna do it now. But there we go. It's beautiful. It's beautiful, and I love it so, so, so much. I'm gonna sign it. I hope you are signing yours right now too, because you should. You should be so proud of this piece. A lot of tricky stuff, but so beautiful in the end. Let's see, where should I sign my name? I always encourage people to sign their artwork. It's an indication that we are owning it and that we're proud of ourselves. Thank you for joining me. I would love to see how your desert landscape turned out. So tag us on social media, send us your paintings, pictures of your paintings, keep your painting. And if you enjoyed this painting and this video, give me a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss out on any free YouTube tutorials. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.